Hi, this is Melody Moko on Retrospectives with John Broughton on Casey Radio 97.7 FM.
Well, let's start just by congratulating you on a fantastic record, and has it already exceeded all hopes and expectations in terms of the chart success you're experiencing at the moment?
Yeah, I definitely didn't. I definitely didn't expect it to do the things that it's done so far, particularly during COVID, with not much touring and not much really going on in that regard, in a live regard. So I did think it would be a lot more hindered than it has been. So it's been exciting to see it actually do something and come to life, and people loving it and listening to it. But maybe releasing it in COVID has been beneficial in that people are at home. A lot of people are at home. A lot of people aren't at work, so they have more time for music, and they have more time for those things that fill their cup, I guess. So they're listening, and so it's been good in that regard. Yeah,
that's exactly the feedback I'm getting from a few musicians that have released albums during this period, that they're finding that people do have more time to sit down and take time to listen to music. They can't go out and see it live, so they're using that time to enjoy it at home.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and I think, anything that can help an album, whether it be people coming to a show, whether it be people listening to it, streaming it, any of those things, they're all beneficial in different ways, and they're all important to an artist. So I guess we just have to focus on the things that are happening and not focus on the fact that we can't get out there and play.
Now, we're going to talk specifically about the record a little later, but I just want to cover a bit of background and history, if that's okay.
Sure.
I believe you had a wonderful music education growing up, a massive record collection owned by your dad.
Yes, and I still do. I'm here at my parents' house in South Australia at the moment, and I always like to, leaf through Dad's collection as an older adult, now that I know even more about music than I did as a kid. But Dad has always had a bunch of records. So I remember being a little girl, and my bragging point for everyone was, well, my dad, he has 7,000 records. And of course, little kids in the 90s were just like, what's a record? So it wasn't important to anybody else, but it was important to me, because it really was like the cornerstone of my life and our house. We always listened to records. If we were going on a road trip, we always had tapes that Dad would tape his records and like a mixtape from his records, and he would put them on a tape. And so we were really familiar with, the specific mixtapes that Dad had for different road trips. And we didn't really have a coffee table. This is not even a joke. We just had a stack of records that would sit, like two big stacks of records that were in the lounge room. And I think they were, the doubles and stuff like that. And we would just put our snacks and our drinks on top of the double records. And every afternoon I would particularly, more than my siblings, I would come home from school and I would choose records out from the bunch, and I'd dance and sing and make my own little tapes and pretend radio shows with the records and things like that. So, I really gravitated towards music very early on, and I think for me, that was, a telling thing when I was a young girl, that I was going to do something with music or writing. I didn't know if, it was going to be singing or what it was going to be. But, I definitely was lucky to have my dad. I'm still lucky to have my dad as my main teacher.
Sounds like my kind of girl. I'm nudging about 7,000 in my collection too, so I can relate to that.
Wow. Yeah, it's a big collection. And I always say to him, would you ever sell it? And he's like, well, no,
No.
I'd never sell it. And I say to him, but you could probably get good money for some of these, Dad. Like, he's got some rare ones, and they don't really get listened to as much now as what they did when we were younger. And, Dad has he's got Spotify now, and which was a big step for him. So he listens to Spotify, but he says, oh no, I could never sell them. So
No.
they're definitely his prized possession.
You certainly set lofty standards for yourself. There's that quote of yours saying you wanted to write like Bob Dylan, sing like Linda Ronstadt. So I guess you've never been lacking in ambition and setting goals for yourself?
No, I guess it was because I was exposed to so much music. I had picked those, idols and those people that if I was going to do this for a career, that I had to be that good, because I knew, particularly listening to the music of, the time, the 60s and 70s, that was just such a high quality, in my opinion, a lot of it. And recorded in a way that there was no auto-tune, nothing like that. So the things that I listened to, they were so good that I thought, if I want to do this, I have to be that good. So who's the best of the best, and how can I be, as good as them? So Bob Dylan was always someone who Dad played, and we listened to his songs, and Linda is like my family's anthem. We listen to Linda Ronstadt every Christmas, and we know all the words to all the Linda records, and I just think she's the finest vocalist that ever existed. So I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I can keep on reaching.
So the songwriting bug, when did that kick in for you, and can you pinpoint a time when you really developed a confidence there in that?
Songwriting for me actually came a lot later than the singing thing, because I didn't play an instrument. So I've always loved to write, and I love words and books and lyrics and things like that, and I always did as a kid. So I was always writing stories mostly. I'd sit there and I'd write stories. But songs came a lot later. I think just naturally because I didn't play an instrument, I didn't really feel like I could write. So I've always watched my dad write poetry and songs, and maybe, we've written little things as I was growing up. But really for me, songwriting started happening when I picked up a guitar, which was later in the game than a lot of people. So I only started playing the guitar when I was about 21. After a lot of pressure from my dad all through life growing up to pick it up, give it a go, give it a shot. But I just avoided it. I guess I thought it was too hard, or I'm not sure why, but I just avoided it. And then finally when I picked it up, it came very quickly after I picked the guitar up. So almost as soon as I started learning 3 chords, G, C, and D, I was hearing songs that I think had been hiding inside me for my whole life after, being a singer and hearing all this music. So it was at about 21 when I started writing really simple, 3-chord country songs.
You seem to be quite comfortable in both the co-write situation and writing alone. Have you, with each co-write situation you've been involved with, have you taken a little something, learned a little something from your co-writer?
Yeah, definitely. Co-writing actually not something that comes naturally to me. Definitely didn't at the beginning, and I only started doing it a few years ago, but I was thrown into a situation where I had to learn pretty quick because I was given a job as the songwriter in residence at the Country Music Academy in Tamworth, and they said, we think you're a great writer and we think you'd be great at this, and I just didn't tell them that, well, actually, I've never really co-written before. I thought, I'll figure it out. I'd only ever really co-written with, a bottle of wine and people that I really loved and trusted. So co-writing, I'd never ever done it in that professional sort of capacity. So I learned pretty quick though, and I learned that there is such benefit to the co-writing process in for me, just watching the way other people write and watching how their minds work, and I find that stuff fascinating. So since I did that job, I've been employed in lots of other songwriting capacities too. I work at the uni in Brisbane now, and so I guess I'm considered somewhat of a professional songwriter, co-writer, and that wasn't, anything that I would have expected 2 or 3 years ago. If you had asked me, I'd say no, I'm not really, not really a co-writer. But I am now, and I did do a lot of co-writing on this record. But still, my favourite co-writes are the ones that I've done with people close to me. I think there's something special about writing a song that is a personal song, but you can get someone's opinion that's really close to you on how they see the situation. So I think people like Catherine Britt, she's a wonderful artist, but also one of my closest friends, and so writing with her is always incredible because A, she's just a really good songwriter, and B, she's got a wealth of experience, and then she's also really close to me. So I enjoy co-writing most with those people that I'm super close with.
Now let's talk about Two Kids and a Radio. You crowdfunded it. It must give you a great shot of confidence knowing there's so many people out there willing to put their money up front for your work.
It was more, when I think about the situation, when I think about the crowdfunding and the time that I was doing it, it's more the emotion that I remember is absolute fear. And absolute, I was just a ball of nerves and mess the whole time the crowdfunding campaign was going on, because I think just by the nature of it, putting yourself out there and asking people to believe in your product before it exists and give you their money and you know, invest in you, it was so nerve-wracking. And also, we'd already sort of booked the record in. The record was happening, and it was sink or swim. Like, if we didn't make the crowdfunding money, the record was just not going to happen in the way that we wanted it to, because we certainly couldn't, my husband and I, he's also a musician and a producer, we certainly couldn't have afforded to make this record the way this record was made without the support of other people. So, yeah, I think back on it as a time that I was just really cranky at my kids and really cranky at my husband, because I was so nervous, and a lot went into it. It's not just put the, you know, crowdfunding campaign out there and wait for people to put their money in. It's like you really have to work the campaign the whole time. So I was a lot on social media a lot, and doing my thing a lot, and lots of live performances and things like that online, lots of live onlines before that was even a COVID thing. It was before COVID, but we were doing lots of that. So yeah, but then when it came to reaching the goal, of course it was amazing. I couldn't even believe that we had reached the goal, and then exceeded the goal too. We were asking for 15, which was, you know, a third maybe of what we needed to make the record, and then we ended up getting 17. So it was pretty good. We booked our flights straight away as soon as you know, the campaign ended, and we're like, wow, we're actually going to do this. And then the real nerves kicked in of, oh God, I've got to make a bloody record.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster, that whole thing.
For sure. Do you think it's a well you can go to multiple times, or do you think there's a limit to how many times you can go down the crowdfunding path?
Well, I know people, like a good friend of mine, Fanny Lumsden, she crowdfunded 3 records, and successfully crowdfunded 3 records for big sums. I think her last record was over 20,000 that she was asking for, but then she decided to call it quits after the 3rd record. I think it's something you can do. I would say 2 or 3 times is probably the maximum I would feel comfortable in doing, but you know, there's always other ways that are similar to crowdfunding.
Yeah,
like
that's right.
Doing a pre-order. What was that?
A pre-order, like you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I know Fanny did for her most recent record. She did more of a pre-order sort of campaign, which, you know, I think there's always ways of making it work. If you don't have the capital to make the record, there's always ways to do it. But the crowdfunding process, I think for a lot of people, it's more that the work at the other end of it is immense. When you're trying to put a record out and you're also trying to fulfill, you know, something like, I mean, with my record, it was 288 people that had supported it. So 288 packages that I had to pack and addresses that I had to chase up because, of course, you know, I'd forgotten to get people to give me their address. So 288 people that I had to chase, and, you know, it took me a week straight of posting just to get it posted, and then you know, the money's gone because you've spent it on the record, and then you have to buy the merchandise and order the CDs. And so I think just by the nature of that being the amount of work it is, sometimes when people have done 1 or 2, they're like, oh God, I couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about recording in Nashville. Obviously, you could have saved on expenses by staying home and recording here, but obviously you really had your heart set on doing this, and the advantages probably outweighed the costs.
I definitely could have, particularly being that my husband, Michael Moko, is a producer and he has a studio in Brisbane, and I easily could have just done it at home with friends and other musicians. But I had been listening to a lot of singer-songwriter Americana music out of Nashville and out of America, and I really wanted to make something different from what was happening in Australia, which to me seemed to, although I love Australian Americana music and I love Australian country music, I wanted to make something that had a little bit of a different vibe to it and didn't feel at all similar to anything that was going on here at the moment. So I thought to do that, I really had to get different players, you know, not use the same players as everyone else, and different players and a different producer as well as my husband. So it was really for me just wanting to do something different. And Nielsen Hubbard, the producer that we used in Nashville, was just was on my top 5 list of, dream producers to work with. So I always loved how he worked with female artists. He'd worked with people like Kim Ritchie, Mary Gaucher, Caroline Spence, Emily Scott Robinson, just people that all of their records for me have this common thing that runs through them, and that's like they just feel real, they feel alive, they don't feel clinical, they don't feel overproduced, and I wanted that for my records. So he was just a man, and it was mostly that. It really was mostly that. So yeah, it was an amazing experience actually recording over there, because it was really different to any other recording I'd ever done. So it was all live, one room, everyone in the room, everyone playing, minimal overdubs. Just a really the sort of experience that I imagine it would have been more like that for Linda and for Emmylou and people like that. So yeah, it was cool. It was cool. I'd love to do it again, but I don't know if I ever will now with COVID.
Of course, the wonderful musicianship of your husband Michael's all over the record. It must be a great thing to have someone who plays such an important role of your music so close at hand at all times.
Yeah, he's useful, Mr. Michael Moko. I sometimes at live gigs call him Ajax because he's multi-purpose. So he's a multi-purpose, like multi-purpose cleaner, or only a multi-purpose man. So, he can do all the things. And it is very much a collaboration, what we do, Michael and I. My music wouldn't be my music and my sound, my thing, without Michael. So it's almost a duo without being a duo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have him, and also wonderful to have him in a studio situation, in a live situation, any situation where I need someone to have the words for me that I don't really know how to. I'm not a really technical musical person, and he is incredibly technical and knows all the things and the right things to say. So he definitely guides me and gives me confidence in those situations. So it's so great getting to do what we do and do it together.
Talk about a couple of the songs. Mama is one that interests me. It seems to be a statement about having to justify your career choice when questioned by people. Is that a pretty fair comment?
Yeah, that is exactly what it's about. It's not necessarily about my mama, because she's incredibly supportive of me and always has been, my family, but maybe a little bit about my husband's family. They're not so, believing in music being a career or a career choice. I think they think it's more of a lifestyle choice, which, for people like Michael and I, or for all musicians, it certainly is not. Michael's gone to university, and we both wear billions of different hats in the music industry, doing all the things we can to make money to support our family and do what we love. But it is constant, and it feels like I've spoken about this song many times to people, and they say, wow, I didn't know that still happened, but it definitely does. For Michael and I, we often get asked, when are we going to get a real job? Or, old mate down the road looking for labourers. Michael, why don't, do you need to go and be a labourer for a week? Or, think all these sort of questions, and as school mums, it's a big thing. My son started school recently, and I often say, I've got to work tonight, and what's your job though? I said, well, I'm a musician, and they're like, no, that job. I thought you meant another job, a different job. I'm like, no, that's the job. That's my real job, my real life job. So yeah, I just got tired of that being a common question and a misconception. So that's where Mama came from.
Now, choosing the first single to drop from an album, I guess, I imagine would be a tough choice to make. You went with Last Cigarette, but I believe that was actually the last song written for the album.
Yeah, it was. I wrote that over Skype with Catherine just before we left, because there wasn't a co-write that I'd written with Catherine that I felt was going to definitely end up on the record. There was a couple that were, maybes, but I thought, we got to get a song on this record, and so let's try again. And she had this idea for Last Cigarette, and she thought it was for me and not for her record. So she said, let's try this. And so we did, and we came away from it thinking, it's okay. It was another maybe it'll end up on the record. Then when we went into the studio, we were in our last couple of days, and we're going through all the maybes with Nielsen, and he just was gobsmacked at that song, and he said, well, that's the best fucking song you've ever written. And I was like, Okay. Well, that's going to go on the record then. And, you know, he just couldn't stop. I could tell the passion in him with that particular song and wanting it to be the best it could be. And he actually said to us before we left the studio that had to be the lead track, you know, the lead single. It just had everything it needed to sort of start the record off. And I, of course, I love the production on it, and Catherine sings a beautiful harmony on it. And so it wasn't a difficult decision after that. It was penned from the beginning, you know, after we left Nashville, actually, that was going to be the first single.
Now, Benjamin is a song for a past boyfriend, I believe, so a very personal one for you. Tell us about that one. Can it be somewhat therapeutic writing a song like that?
So that's one of those weird songs that I don't even really remember writing it. I remember writing... So I remember where I was and what I was doing, and I was actually driving when I wrote it, and in my head. So I started the process of writing it, but the melody. But I had to come home. I got home and got my husband. I sang it to him because I knew that what I was writing wasn't something that I was capable of playing on the guitar to get it to where it needed to be. So we sat down together and worked it out melodically, and then I had the lyrics already, and they really just came out in, you know, a few minutes, because I think it was a song that had been in my head and inside of me for a long time and needed to come out. So I guess therapeutic, yeah. I guess it was almost like a therapy thing, something that I had held in and needed to get out about that particular relationship. But it's been interesting, Benjamin, because it's had such a strong response from people, such a positive response, which I find interesting because I felt a lot of people might think it was weird to write a song about a past relationship that wasn't scornful, that was, you know, that was reminiscent and almost celebratory of the time that person gave you. So I have been really surprised by the response, to be honest.
Another personal one is Easy Way to Die, which I saw you mentioned almost didn't make it onto the album. Was that because of the personal nature of it, or was there anything in particular that convinced you to include it?
Yeah, it was just the personal nature. I wrestled with it for a long time. Maybe not just the personal nature, but the fact that I felt it was giving a part of my life away that I had never really spoken about. And never really been open about, never wanted to be super open about either. Just wasn't, you know, something I liked to remember or to tell people. So I wrote it and kind of just thought, it won't go anywhere. It'll just be a song that I've written for myself. And then I played it for Michael, and he convinced me to try and be okay with it going on the record. So I sat with it for a while and then played it for my dad, who, you know, it is features in the song. It's about him. So played it for him, and well, actually my sister. I sent it to my sister and said, what do you think? Do you think that Dad would be okay with this? And she then played it to my dad, which caused a bit of an argument between us, because I was like, oh no, I wasn't ready for that. But it was probably good that she did, because I wasn't there, and Dad could have his time to process it, and he was fine with it. I think because he's so such a music fan and knows so much about music, he understands that it's not about, you know, it's not about the content. It's about what's good for the song, and he could recognise that it needed to be said. So it's actually his favourite song now, which I find hilarious. But he loves it. So yeah, I'm glad it went on the record. I think it also I like that darker edge that it kind of adds musically and production wise, and yeah. So I'm glad that I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it now. Now that it's out in the world, it's whatever to me. But yeah, it was definitely a big process letting it happen.
Would there be any one particular track on the album that you'd point to as a centrepiece, something that symbolises the theme of the album more than any of the others?
Well, it would have to be, I guess for me it would have to be Mama or Save Me Rock and Roll, that really are central to what the album's about, central to the album's theme, because it really is a record that's about, you know, my life after putting out my first record, my life as a touring musician, my life as a mum, and I think those two songs really capture how I dealt with life through that time and what my life was doing. And it is really meant to be an exploration of that couple of years of having babies, being on the road. So those two would probably be the central theme of the record.
And just before I let you go, I know I've got to do that. Tell us about your podcast, the Women Enough podcast, which you've been doing recently, and the inspiration behind those.
Oh, the podcast, Women Enough, yeah. Well, I started the Women Enough project in Tamworth a couple of years ago just because I was a little bit tired of watching so many shows that there was no women and seeing so many things happen with no women involved, no women in the band, nothing like that. So I decided, look, I'm going to give girls and women a platform to perform in Tamworth that is all-inclusive and lets them say what they want, do what they want, sing what they want. So the Woman Enough project was born, and it was myself and Natalie Henry, a Newcastle musician, that we started it together. And then from then on it really grew and it became a touring. We did a tour of it last year where we included, local musicians from the towns we're in and also some higher profile people like Catherine Britt and Lynn Botel. And it really grew into a movement rather than just a gig, I guess. So the idea for the podcast was born this year because we couldn't do another tour and we wanted to do a whole bunch of things with it, a songwriting camp, a mentor program. We had all these things in the works, but none of it, obviously, with COVID could go ahead. So we thought, how can we still give a voice to people and how can we still let this project move? And so we decided on the podcast, which I think a lot of people are doing, podcasts and YouTube series and things like that. But I really wanted to not only let people tell their stories that were women in music, but it expanded. So there's some episodes coming up that are about women in the wider arts community in Brisbane, where I live. So yeah, I really enjoyed hearing people's stories, and it's cool to do something different. I like words and writing and talking and hearing people's stories in any way, shape or form. So it was cool for me to get that podcast off the ground.
Fantastic. Look, Melody, I've got to let you go and catch a quick breath before your next interview, but congratulations on this. You've passed the difficult second album test with flying colours. I think it's a magnificent piece of work, one of the albums of the year, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
All the best. Take care.
All right, no worries. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.